Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this rather unique offering. I am thrilled to welcome Jill, but especially I'd like to say a huge thank you to all the teachers online here. We know that this has been the most incredibly difficult couple of years, and we know you're exhausted. So for you to come join this still in the middle of us, knowing that you have a school day again tomorrow, we're just very grateful. So on behalf of the Maine Department of Education, I'd like to extend a heartfelt welcome. I'm Shari Templeton. I'm an interdisciplinary specialist. And what I'd love to do is let you know that we are presenting this workshop in collaboration with the Friends of the Maine Coastal Islands National Wildlife Refuge. And rather than have me trip through the exciting things that they do along the coast, I'd like to pass it over to Tori Tibbetts and Carney McRae and let them chat a little bit about the Friends of Maine Coastal Islands before we introduce the star of the evening, and that Jill Palto.
Awesome, thank you, Shari. So I'm Tori Tibbetts. I work with the Friends of Maine Coastal Islands National Wildlife Refuge. And what we are is a friends group that supports the Maine Coastal Islands refuge system, which mostly is made up of 73 islands in the Gulf of Maine here. And we really focus on seabird restoration and helping those populations get back up to their historic levels here. And we got to meet Jill through her exhibiting in our art exhibit that we have here in Rockland. So we were really excited to help work with her and the Department of Education to put this amazing program together. And we hope you guys are just as excited as we are.
Thank you, Tori. And if you have not yet had a chance to look at some of Jill's exceptional work online, I certainly encourage you to look at her website. That it was linked in the PDF that you received with tonight's information and outline. And it is exceedingly exciting for me to introduce you to Jill, who is not only an incredible, accomplished artist, but she comes with an environmental science background, and that is huge. Also, as you heard Tori talk about the kinds of bird projects that they specialize in at the Friends of Maine Coastal Islands, I'd also draw your attention to the data that Jill provided in that handout, and you'll notice that there's a direct link. So while we're looking specifically at some coastal island types of themes tonight, we know that this could be adapted to whatever subsets of climate data you have around your areas. So without further ado, it is with great excitement that I introduce Jill Palto to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I also really appreciate you joining this after your school day. And I'm excited to kind of share with you this activity, because it's something that was originally just inspired by the own art I create, but then trying to figure out ways to share that with students and activities that I would have liked to have in the classroom to learn more about climate change, but to do so in an interdisciplinary way. So basically tonight I'm going to be just kind of walking you through this activity, and you'll do it yourself. You'll create your own data art piece based on some of the data from the Friends of Maine Coastal Island Refuge about the bird populations and some of the data sets I sent you. And so to start, I'm just going to give a little introduction about the work that I do and some of the data pieces that I have created before kind of turning it over to the activity. Okay. So I started creating art like this painting in the background in 2015 and incorporating graphs and data into my work And so in this painting, for example, these are salmon, and underneath them is a graph line, and that's just showing changes to the species of salmon's population over time. And I wanted to do this just to show this very literal kind of combination of this is what's happening to them, but I have these visuals that I wanted to be, beautiful to help tell that story. And so I started doing this because of my own experience as an earth and climate science student in college, and wanting to bring what I got to learn in my science classrooms to other people, to my peers in our classrooms, and et cetera. So now what I do is work full-time as an artist and a science communicator. I'm based right now in Portland, Maine, although I'm actually moving to Washington State in a month, and have been in Maine for over 10 years. And then I also work as a science communicator. And so getting to be involved still in some like science fieldwork, like on the right, this is a photo of me from Washington State this past August. And so I still participate in some kind of science field projects, but primarily my goal now is to communicate those projects, to work with the different science teams by creating art and using that art to share, and then by working with students to do so as well. And so I got through a master's in earth and climate science at the University of Maine. And over that time, I got to go to all these places to do research, which was incredible and not something that a lot of people have the opportunity to do. And I think getting to go to these places myself and see climate change in different forms in these places, like working in Washington State in the bottom right, for example, and seeing those glaciers change, was really impactful. And you see what is happening yourself and what is underlying the data that might be, showed in science papers or in the news. And you're able to better feel that tangible, just how tangible climate change is becoming everywhere. And I'm just going to show a few quick examples of my artwork. And so these paintings, they're both about Maine. They're both watercolor paintings. On the left is a painting that I did back in 2016. And the graph is making up the top surface of the ocean. And that graph was about how the near surface temperature in the Gulf of Maine is warming over time. It goes up and down, but the overall trend is it's warming pretty quickly. And so the story I wanted to tell in that painting was about how that affects all these different types of species throughout the water column. And I had chose cod as fish in the painting and have them be kind of get more faint and light as they go across because they were really overfished as well. I have shrimp and lobster and soft shell clams in the sand. And so it's kind of a story of change and how, these species are being affected, and this is their only habitat, so they may have to shift where they live. The painting on the right is more recent. I finished that in 2021, and this one is also about the coast of Maine, but a little bit of a different focus. I have it be kind of like a beach house in front of a coastal marsh, and the blue line kind of cutting across the middle of the painting is sea level rise. And to the right, that line splits up into 3 different dashed lines, and that's representing the 3 most likely scenarios for sea level rise through 2100. And then I, in the background, also included a bar graph in green, and that graph is about increasing use of renewable energy in Maine. And so that was meant to show some of the positive strides that we're taking in the state towards kind of preparing ourselves for sea level rise and climate change. And kind of something I'm doing a little more moving forward and trying to encourage students, like a mix of kind of positive and negative topics about climate change. And then lastly, I wanted to share the painting I did for the cover of Time magazine, and this was in July 2020. So for me, in this point in my career, this was definitely the biggest opportunity I've had. And I made the painting for the cover, and it was chosen. And I wanted to illustrate global climate change. So I have 5 different graphs about things like sea level rise, renewable energy, increasing air temperatures, and all for how those things are affecting the entire world. So that was a great way to kind of feel like science communication is finding its footing, and really being a good way to communicate and connect with people. And so it feels good to be a part of that in one sense. So I've been using this art in workshops and talks by visiting lots of different classrooms, or even just giving a presentation, sharing my work, whether that's more kind of formal, like in a gallery, or virtually showing my work online. And then I've also been trying to make my data art activities accessible online. That's something I've been working on improving, and I want to create a lot more content that I just have on my website for teachers to access. So sometimes I visit classrooms, but sometimes teachers just do this activity on their own, and I love hearing about that when that's the case. And my goal with this form of science communication is to help others learn about our environment in ways that are maybe more accessible and relatable, and just to acknowledge the different types of learning that everyone has. And so I think that the art can make things seem more tangible. Sometimes it can help people tap into what underlies the topic and what are kind of the emotions or importance of that topic. So I think one thing that I'll kind of keep touching back on and look forward to discussing with you all during this is the application of this activity in the classroom, because it can really be so different depending on how you want to implement it, and what type of class you're in, what type of like age group, of course. And so I have done this a little bit with really young kids in earlier in elementary school. I've done it a lot more with middle and high school students. But students can, if they're older students, they could even sometimes collect their own data about something they're researching. So sometimes students can do find the data themselves by researching it online, which obviously can be difficult. And then also is always an option to find data and give it to students and let them have like a choice of a range of topics. So it's just a lot of different options for that. Students can also like have to create the graph themselves and learn about graphing, or they can also just like trace a graph or cut it out, like we'll just be doing tonight for time, and can explore different mediums, different types of subject matter. It doesn't have to be climate change related, of course. And I think one thing that's neat is the opportunity to implement this in different types of classrooms, whether it's an art classroom or science one, or if teachers are collaborating between. So I have a lot of thoughts on how this has been used and what I've been able to see. And if any of you have in mind a way you'd like to use it, I'd love to hear about that. For some reason with this video, I have to exit the viewer, but I just wanted to show you, I worked with Yarmouth Middle School, a teacher, Morgan Cuthbert, if any of you know him. And basically I did an initial pilot project with Morgan and just like, I think 5 of his students. But then we ended up doing the project with the whole 7th grade the following semester, and they all made data art. So this is a little video of the students who were in the pilot project with me initially and their takeaway.
I find this project really exciting and engaging because it's a new, like, I never really thought of doing artwork this way, like taking a problem and then taking a graph and then putting them together and getting this really cool, really interesting piece of artwork.
To not only learn about an issue in the world, but also get to express it through art. And it's really helped me get a better understanding of some of the topics and issues going on in the world.
To interact with a female scientist and artist who's been on the cover of Time magazine, because you're getting tips from an expert, someone who knows what she's doing, and it feels like she's actually listening to you and actually giving you feedback.
I really enjoy how she incorporates different graphs and science data into her art, because I think it's a really cool way of learning about serious topics.
You're taking a problem and taking a graph and then putting them together into something that people can really understand and people can really relate to. Like, people could just look at a graph and be like, oh no, that's too complicated. I'm not looking at that. Or I'm not really gonna dig deep into that. And then they can look at your piece of artwork and be like, wow, that really explains it really well. And that really accentuates like all of the ups and downs.
This project has really given me a new perspective on global warming, because it was so interesting to see the graphs and like what they affected. For example, I did the rise of ocean waters, and it was cool to see how many things that affected. Well, not cool, kind of alarming to see how many things that affected. And for example, it like affects polar bears because obviously a lot of ice is melting, and it affects lots of marine life because they're like obviously in search of colder waters, and if the waters rise enough, it could affect the land masses a lot.
And I definitely, if I had to, I definitely do it again. Like I try it in the future.
I loved this extra extension, and if I could do it over again, I would definitely choose this project again.
Awesome. So it was really fun for me to see their perspectives. Again, that was just like a smaller group of students, but I'm always really impressed with what students create from this. And it's not that I'm surprised, but I'm always pretty blown away by what they're able to communicate with this project. And so then I just wanted to show you quickly the website from when the entire 7th grade did the project. So I just have that down here. Because the teacher Morgan I worked with made this website, and I'm happy to send this link because it has a lot of good information of it and in more of a sense than I've yet compiled and how he implemented. So the homepage is just about the project, what it is, what the different steps are. It has some information about my work. And then he did create a rubric for how he was choosing to grade it based on their graph, their artwork. They had to cite their sources, do some writing. So I linked to the rubric, and then he had images of some of the final artworks from students, and I was able to go. This was during COVID when I worked with them, so I first had met with the students virtually, but then I was able to go and meet with the 7th grade outside, which was really great to see their work in person. And I just had like 1 or 2 minutes with each student for them to show me and tell me about their work. So I'll stop sharing those now, but I'm really impressed with the stories that they were able to tell. Okay. And here are just a few more examples from some different schools that I've worked with, some different age groups for student art over time, and such a wide range of topics that has been done about in different classrooms. So basically, I just wanted to introduce a little bit of a snippet into what I do and why I think this work can be a great assignment. And so for the workshop, I'm going to be first giving kind of a data art example, just walking through one of the pieces that I've created, and to show you my steps, to show you how this kind of looks before you start it yourself. After giving that example, there'll be some preparation time for you to choose from the data that was linked, and I can send that again if anyone needs it. But to choose between the data available and start to brainstorm your design that you're going to use. Then after kind of preparing your idea and having maybe a few different ideas, checking back in, and I was thinking to do some breakout rooms for the amount of people there are, so we can actually just discuss maybe in small groups for about 20 minutes what we're thinking for the topic, how are you going to tell the story, and I'll kind of move around between those rooms, and then we'll have about an hour, give or take, to do the data art activity itself. And I'm going to be doing this too. I chose one of the topics, and I'm going to be making an art just within this time frame, something quicker, and then kind of come back after creating it, whether you're done or not is fine, but to kind of debrief where we're at, like have more of a group discussion, and then also if there's interest, breakout rooms again to kind of share the final artworks and be able to give a little more detail about what you are working on creating. And then I just kind of want to wrap up with some discussion about how you may implement this in your classrooms. And I would love to, during kind of this end part to really hear even more from you all. So basically, I want to do data art because data is meant to be more objective, factual. And so I think that's what can make it seem more abstract to anyone. So for the data art example, I'm going to be walking through one of my other paintings, but I just wanted to show one example of how I took this graph, because this was the very first graph that I made a data art painting about. And so it's basically a graph about the decreasing size of glaciers in Washington, a field project that I've been working on for over a decade. And so on the y-axis on the left, it says annual mass balance. And the mass balance is basically just the health of the glacier. So how much snow it's getting in the winter versus how much melt happens in the summer. And so when that balance is off and there's more melt, the glaciers are going to be getting smaller in size. And that's happened in this graph over the time frame of 1984 to 2014. So 30 years of change. And I have this data up until 2021, but I had made a painting about this topic in 2015. So this is the graph I had used at the time. And for me, when I see that graph, this is what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the experience that I got to have going to the field. This is what the data means to me, is collecting it. It's seeing glaciers like this. Sorry, I'm just getting a little feedback from someone, if you don't mind muting. And so for a lot of people, they're not going to see that. They're going to look at that graph and they may not really engage with it, which is fine, but this is what I see. And so that's what I'm trying to bring into my art, is like the emotions, the visuals, the story that is, that data is telling if you take the time to look. And thinking about how I might create this, make that data into an artwork, I do a lot of brainstorming to think about different ideas, like how do I want to tell the story about the glaciers getting smaller? So like on the left, it was like a simple idea of having the glacier look like it's kind of melting into the ocean. In the middle, I have the melt coming off the ice, forming a stream, and that stream is supporting the ecosystem. And then on the right, a different view where there are people doing different types of sports on the mountains, on the glaciers. And so that's something I always encourage with students, is to like brainstorm for a while and think of different ideas to show the same kind of topic, because there's so many different ways you can focus on that story about something, and you can zoom in on details, you can make it really big picture, lots of different options. And so this was the final, the painting that I made about that topic, and this was that I made in 2015. And so it's a little bit abstract. I think some people know it's a glacier, some people might not. And I was trying to show the beauty of the patterns and colors in the ice, and having that graph make up the top surface of the glacier in a really kind of steep part, as it's kind of cracking and flowing down the side of the mountain. And near the bottom of the glacier, I have it look a lot more kind of brown and gray and dirty, because a lot of debris will kind of start to melt out as the ice thins. And I just think that this can work because art is more subjective. It's more open to our interpretations about what we see and what we feel. And that's why it's easier for it to be emotional, to have that aspect and to help us ground it, or some people to ground it in their lives. And I do think that both, data and science and data and art rely on observation and creativity and storytelling. So my goal here is just to make it a way that it's just a different form of communication than the data. That data is really important, but then, okay, how can I take it to another step of sharing that story with someone? So then I just want to walk through a data art example. So my process is coming up with topic idea for the piece. Once I do that, I'll start to kind of research that topic and just learn a little bit background about it and find the data that I'm going to use for it. Once I have the data and the topic in mind, I'll start to really brainstorm and sketch that idea, which I always consider to be the most difficult part for me. It's just like, what's the new thing I'm going to show? How am I going to take this data and make it into a visual story that makes sense to people? And so I'll do a lot of kind of sketching before I come up with my final idea. and then start to create it. So when I'm thinking of topics, like here, I have these photos that are supposed to be of a coastal marsh, and I'm going to be showing you some paintings that were about marshes and sea level rise, but different one than the one I already showed about that topic. And so I'll start to collect a lot of photos and just kind of get some inspiration for like what I might want my scene to look like. And I'll kind of collect these collages. Like I have a Mac, so I use Keynote, but like on PowerPoint or whatever, I'll collect all of my photos in one place in like a folder or on a presentation, and just kind of look back at them as I'm making the art. So sometimes I'll have students do that too. It's like, oh, if you want to do this species, collect all these photos and keep them in a folder, so you can use them to help you. And then I'll find the data that I'm going to use. So in this painting, I had used data about sea level rise and found that. And so that's what this graph is showing that I used in the painting. And then I'll start to do brainstorming and sketching. And this is really where I start. This is how simple I do my sketching. And I think the common term that I was taught, like when I was in high school, was like to do little thumbnail sketches. And so I'll have them be like maybe 2 inches tall. And I'll do little sketches just to think about like playing around with where I want things to be in my piece, just to get like ideas off my head and down on the page. And I'll basically do usually like probably at least 20 of these, often more, but it'll help me think of new ideas because I'm trying to work on storytelling. And I'll often choose kind of like a few of these, like maybe 3, to do a slightly more detailed sketch and see like, okay, what am I liking the best now that I'm putting a little more time into this? And so this is that more detailed sketch where I was starting to put the pieces into place about how it might look. Like on the bottom is where my graph of sea level rises with the fish in the ocean. Above that was supposed to be like more shallow marsh water and people in it measuring water depth and planting grass. And then behind them was marsh grass and then forest. And so I'll start to do some sketches like this to say like, okay, am I liking where this is going? Let me try out a few ideas and see what I think. And then I'll keep creating those resource pages. I just left this one pretty messy because this is how I had it when I created it. I just found a bunch of photos of this species of fish called mummichog that were going to be in my painting. And so I'll just collect a bunch and have these like resource pages that I just make for myself. And like I had some info about them that I just pasted all in there just to have it in one place that I can look at. I can think about, what colors I want to do, things like that. And I'll kind of get all my material ready so that I'm ready to paint or draw. And then this is totally optional depending on what students want, but my method is to start with sketching and then I'll add color on top of that just so I can kind of plan it out beforehand. And obviously it's easier to not mess up, and I'll keep that. I don't erase that pencil. I'll just like paint or draw right on top of it. So I was drawing out how I wanted everything to be, which I often do. And then I'd started to create these paintings. So I'll go through this pretty quick, but just thought it'd be fun to show some process images. A lot of times if there's details, I'll kind of leave them and do them after. Like I'd painted around all the fish and just left them white for the moment. And just kept like filling in spaces. This is my studio space in Portland. And I'll slowly work up with like different layers and different details, and a few detailed shots of the species of fish and birds, the people, some of the people in the painting, and the final works. So I just finished these in February. And again, at the bottom is sea level rise with the fish. And then you have a coastal marsh environment with the trees in the background and people interacting with that. So I won't go into more detail on that unless anyone has questions, but that was kind of my process of creating these pieces, which was just throughout this winter. And again, this is the graph I had used about sea level rise. And so this by itself to me it is powerful. It does evoke a lot of stories, but just looking at my painting and then this, I think it does something pretty different. So basically my process and what I'll have you guys do today is to choose your graph that you're going to be using from the options that were sent. And basically you can do 2 things. You can either, if you have access to a printer, or if you've already printed out your graph, that's what I have. I printed out one of the graphs that I was going to use. And I'm going to just cut along the graph line so I can trace that jagged edge. And another option, if you didn't have a printer, is putting the graph up on the computer screen and just using the screen as kind of like a light box and tracing it with like printer paper and then cutting that out. And then after I cut out the paper, I'm just going to be tracing it onto the paper that I brought to use, any type of paper. And I'm going to be using colored pencils. I'm going to make a piece too at the same time as you today. So I brought colored pencils. And be anything that you want, of course. It doesn't have to be color. And then one thing to keep in mind is just considering like the shapes in the data and how you want to use those. I usually try to make the data kind of part of my scene. It doesn't have to be, it can just sit on top of an image. But I think it could be fun to figure out how you can implement it where it kind of becomes part of a landscape and becomes like you can notice something's different, but it becomes a little bit more of like a subtle kind of incorporation. And so basically now I want to do kind of a 20-minute period where you will have time to choose your topic and start to brainstorm ideas. And so during that time after you choose your topic, basically anything that's helpful for preparing to make the final piece. So like sketching ideas, like writing any thoughts, and you can find photo references of the birds or fish or whatever topic you've chosen. And then just come up with an idea of how you want to share your topic. So it can be just one if you have decided your final idea, or if you have a few and you're thinking between them too by the time the session is over. So feel free to ask questions. I'm gonna, I guess I might exit so I can see you guys and talk to you. So let me know if this was enough information to get started. But yeah, basically choosing your topic and starting to brainstorm. And basically, I don't know if we're on track for time, basically. So perhaps, in 20 minutes. So that's like 4 o'clock about, we can come back together, and then we're going to be discussing in some smaller breakout rooms what we're thinking about for making for the data art activity. Awesome.
Do you want me to open up the breakout rooms for you, Jill?
Sure, and I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that at 4 o'clock maybe.
At 4? Okay.
Yeah. So first I'll just keep it open because anyone can ask questions, and this will just be a time to start brainstorming your topic. Like I chose the roseate tern recovery in Maine, but I don't know anything about that yet. So I'm gonna look a little bit of information about them up, and I'm gonna do some very loose, quick sketches about some ideas for what I want my artwork to be to start. Let me know if anything didn't make sense.
Is there anyone who needs the data that was sent out on the PDF? Looks like we're good. Jill, do you want to take the question in the chat?
Yeah, let me bring up the data for that question in the chat. I'm going to ask Cardi and Tori, because I see what you mean with that stacked bar graph, and I don't know, unfortunately, which of the turns that refers to for that graph. So I'm going to see if they know or not, because that was the graph as I was sent it without any more information. Sorry about that.
Hi, I am just gonna double check and make sure that I know.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna look at my presentation notes and see if I have it in there. My gut feeling is that the common turn is gonna be the blue bar and the Arctic turn is gonna be the red bar, just based on common turns are a lot more common and we see way more of them than Arctic turns. So it would make sense, or sorry, vice versa, flip them around. I have it backwards, but yeah, the common turns are more common, so the higher number is probably representative of them.
Thank you.
Danielle is asking, in terms of the sea scallop biomass, is overfished biomass threshold the same as the maximum sustainable yield?
Let me take a look.
I would think so, but
For that question about the sea scallop biomass, I'm not positive, but it looks to me from the graph like the target for what they want biomass to be is a little bit higher than what they're saying for kind of a yield for fishing, maybe to like have some wiggle room where they would love it to be higher than it is. And so to have that be possible, having fishing capped a little ways below that is how I'm interpreting it, at least. Let me know if that's not clear.
the Pew Trust says that when more than the sustainable share is taken out of a fishery, then it's see, how's that, overfished. So I think that's one and the same.
Okay, I see the new question as well about puffin data.
Okay.
For the puffin data, I believe that the year I know is on the x-axis, and then I think it's the average amount of puffin chicks that are being born like per couple. So like the average sometimes is less than one per couple. So on the y-axis there, I think that's like the average amount of like, yeah, puffin chick per pair of puffins. That makes sense.
It always confuses students when you talk about the rate of childbearing in terms of how do you get a partial partial child.
Yeah.
But it's a rate.
So if people are feeling like in a good pause point, I think now I was thinking about doing some small 5 breakout rooms, so that we can kind of discuss with each other what we're thinking for like how to tell the story. And so basically just maybe first introduce yourself and the school you're at, and then just share for like a few minutes kind of like what you're thinking, or if you have a few ideas, share them. And I'm going to move around between the rooms, and we'll have about like kind of 20 minutes. So if we don't need that time, we can start on the activity, but about 20 minutes to kind of discuss, and like each person can have a few minutes to discuss what they're thinking about showing. But if you haven't decided yet or still working on it, we'll have time right after that again to keep kind of brainstorming and thinking, because I feel like 20 minutes for ideas goes by quick.
Great. I'll open up the breakout rooms for you. I've got them all set.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Everyone, I think, is in their breakout rooms.
All right. You didn't assign me to one, right?
You're the host, you don't get assigned, and I
Oh,
didn't
that
assign
makes sense.
Jill to one. You might want to pause the recording right now.
Yeah, I should have paused it a while ago.
To just hear like about what you're thinking for your story. And so basically we have like an hour to create the pieces. And so, you know, first, just like if you're continuing to kind of research and brainstorm if you need to your idea. If you have, once you have that like final idea of what you want to do, printing or tracing your graph and cutting it out to trace on your final paper. And then you could just get as far as we get with that hour for creating it. And so I obviously anytime during that hour, feel free to take a break or anything, but I'm just going to be here making my own graph the whole time and can talk or answer questions or discuss. Like I'll try to check in a lot, and I'll just be here unmuted and staff for making our pieces. I just want you to have the experience of creating it yourself and figuring out how to tell that story visually yourself. Yeah, so I'll check basically maybe around like 5:25, kind of like circling back. And then we're going to be sharing the pieces both in Breakout Rooms and as a group.
So I did the herring, and I'm not even sure if I'm correct here, but I did just a little research because I didn't have time to do a lot of research, but I just was thinking about how it affected species in the ocean. So I did a whale's mouth, although I realized proportions are wrong because I didn't have a lot of time to work on this, but I don't know. I just added collage elements in and another graph. And then I felt like it was really hard to balance the graph with the art. I'm from looking at the art perspective more than the science perspective. So it was interesting to do it. I feel like it just doing it kind of cemented it in my mind. And then if I do this with kids, I kind of have a better idea after brainstorming in the breakout room. Also, that really helped kind of grapple with how to make this more personal instead of kind of your vision, you know, make it somewhat a personal vision for me or for each of us. So I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for. Anything else that you're interested in about?
No, I think that's great. That I wanted to hear about like how it is for you guys to try to do the activity and what you've learned from just trying to do it yourself. Because even me trying to do it in like the short amount of time is a really different format, but it gets you thinking about how it can be used and what kind of like time frame you need and like tools that you need. So, and I liked the use of collage. I think is another cool idea, something that students can do, especially students who might not feel like if they're good at drawing or anything like that, you know, or to like work it in and do both.
Yeah, that seemed to happen because of the time constraint, but I think that would be a non-threatening way for kids. But I did feel that it was really crucial to have a computer with a printer that printed color like on hand. I think if I was at home without a printer that was working, it's crucial to have all those pieces or to have it with you before you begin, kind of thing. So
yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go next.
Great.
I did the herring as well. And I realized we don't have a color printer except for that prints very little. So what I did was I drew a fish that with scales that was live that I would color to look, to have it be lifelike. And then a skeleton of the fish. And then I graphed the fish where the live part of the graph, where the fish are is the live fish, and where they're and so in other words, the graph goes along, and the images of fish that are living, just upright fish, would be on the bottom part of the graph. And the top part of the graph has skeletons of that fish. And then in the background is a school of those fish. And I mean, it doesn't really, now looking at it after I'm rushing to get it done, it doesn't tell a lot other than it's saying live, dead, amount, and not. I mean, it's just more of emotional. You know, you can see that there's dead and you can see that there's alive.
That's cool. I like that break of like, yeah, sometimes the graph can be like a break or a change in what the image is, or like a separation between like parts of the image. So I like that use. And I feel like having that like literal direct message is what I really like about this. Like, I think that was really clear and like powerful and emotional, very clearly and very quickly, you know. That was great.
I can share. So I did the Atlantic Puffins because it's close to where I'm living and teaching, and really was not feeling drawing today, but was just like noticing all those really, really straight graph lines and how well they were representing in string, because you can just tighten it and make it perfectly straight. I'm not all the way through. I don't know if you can see the pencil over Zoom or not, but I'm going to finish the additional colors. And my hope would be that this would be like darkened, like the rocky bold coast where they live. And then this would be like more of a sky situation. And this is like a kind of a short format. I was really hoping to have the images a little bit more corresponding with the ups and downs in the rock, like a little puffling falling off maybe. And like here, this one that's kind of in a hollow in the rock is nesting, and like some of them flying up and some of them flying down to represent like this pretty big ebb and flow that's going on. But yeah, this is just like a quick draft version. And I'm super excited because our students are actually already doing an art and science bird project. And so it's just happenstance that these data sets work really well with it. They've each individually researched a bird drawn historically, and then made their own image about that bird. So now they can have an image about some data about that bird. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool then. Yeah, I love how it works with the thread too. That's perfect. It's already looks like really cool. And like having that like kind of multimedia is awesome.
I can go next if you're looking for another one.
Great.
So what I did the puffin one. Can y'all see this? I can't see myself, so I don't know what y'all see.
You can see it.
Okay, cool. So on mine, I kind of wanted to zoom in on it. And so I have the graph is represented as the shell. I didn't have a good off-white, so I just left it white. So it's a little hard to see. So I had to make it gold so that it would actually stand out. But like the reason why we're having the shortage of puffins is because we're having food problems as the Gulf of Maine is like heating up. And so I wanted to kind of zoom in on that relationship between the mother puffin trying to provide food and that we're having problems with having enough food for them due to, the crashing herring populations. And so I just wanted like a little close up of what's going on. And I just kind of liked getting a chance to look at something else because normally whenever I'm working with the kids at the Gulf of Maine, we have a very set program. So currently our format doesn't really have a lot of art incorporated into what we have the kids do and their like set field trip activities, learning about how climate change is affecting lobsters and black sea bass. And so I don't know, I'm kind of looking to the future of maybe in that we could have a future opportunity where maybe kids could, do a little bit more interactive art rather than like only data. So I like the idea of kind of having the two.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And I like yours is very like, it's like a very like intimate kind of like, yeah, good close up of like just one like mother and chick type of thing. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Very emotional. Yeah. And maybe like one more for the whole group. And then I think do some breakout rooms so that everyone can share to people.
Well, mine borrows heavily from yours, but I think the one thing I stumbled on is that I was doing the rosette tern and I came across a picture that had nesting boxes on it that were numbered. So I ended up like putting nesting boxes and numbering them with the dates that I was using. So that was a way for me to kind of make the data more visible. And then I could sort of say where we were within time. You're muted.
That's the part I like about when there's like a topic that students are using, and like someone had asked me about like how do they have different ideas for how to represent it, and so like just finding those little details and then like hitting on that, like that specific idea of using the boxes. I think that's what's really cool about it, and like can try to like encourage students to find that, like if they have different idea of a different list of ideas, or if there's like a group of websites that's like ready for them, they can always find their own too. But like stuff like that where it's like, okay, here's all these different like themes on this one topic that they can focus on if they need help brainstorming because they haven't even learned about it yet, for example, you know. Because if I think the other approach is if the students have really learned about the topic, then maybe they have those tools already, but I think it could work either way. Great, so I think I might do like the same kind of like just do 5 breakout rooms again, just until about like for maybe like 10 minutes so that everyone can share, and then kind of like come back one more time to give some like kind of final thoughts or hear from you guys about anything.
Okay, I'll open up the rooms for you.
Thank you. Slides. So I think, and starting to do this more and more over the years, my main kind of objective for students that I'm trying to like share when I visit schools is to absolutely like help students just develop more science communication skills and get them to have ways to connect what they learn in the classroom to what really matters to them. Then there's like the part of data and graphing skills that can come into play. And a lot of that again is like taking graphs and data and kind of grounding that in reality and what they're experiencing or what they've learned about, giving those topics of personal importance, I think is what I've been hearing from students is really important to them. And in doing so, I feel like I am often learning so much about what they care about. And I felt like it was the same like doing it with you today, which is really cool because of, like I said, how many different ideas I saw, how many different approaches and media is what I've seen with students too. So it's awesome to bring that to you guys and see the same sort of thing and the same sort of creativity happen. And I think it's just been a really effective way for them to kind of connect some of these ideas that they're learning with, again, like the reality of what it is in their lives. At least for some students, of course, only. So in my perspective, art is just one of many good ways to just really connect with people about important topics. I think that's something that art has always done. And so I always just keep in mind with doing something interdisciplinary is how different types of media can really communicate complexity so different. So it's something I really try to talk to students about is like, it's not that this way is more important to share, it's just another way, different way that is, changing and bringing a different kind of voice forward about the science. So really sharing that, with creativity, data can tell a story that's really personal and relatable. And as I kind of spoke to at the beginning with the glacier data, I think a lot of times for scientists, it's already doing that what they're seeing in their papers, what they're seeing in their graphs is something really, really important. They can see what's behind it. They can see the field work, the lab work that they did. But I know that a lot of people can't, and that's understandable. And so I think that's what this activity can bring is that like view of like, oh, okay, this is what this looks like. This gets me to think about it at a deeper level. And my primary goal just for my art in general is to help start conversations about climate change. And I think that's what, again, comes from realizing what these topics mean in our own lives. And so that is what I have seen from a lot of students too, and heard from them and getting them to talk about what they're thinking about and seeing, because I know a lot of them, like us, are now like observing a lot more, like it's a lot more evident, like here in Maine and other places, climate change is a lot more evident. And so that's kind of scary. So thinking about like, what does this mean in my life? And with that in mind, I kind of spoke to this, but I've been kind of conscious of what kind of topics like I recommend, like having it be some topics too that are like positive changes and actions that people are taking to mitigate climate change. so that they're not just, you know, being given information about sea level rise and that's it, for example. So if you guys implement this in your classroom, it's up to you, but I would love to get any photos if you want of your student art or of your students working or anything like that. So I have 2 emails here, and one is mine, and then one is for Tori, because there's going to be an opportunity for student artwork to be shown at the gallery that's in Rockland, Maine, at the Friends of Maine Coastal Island Center. And it's a really nice gallery space, and they've had student art there before. And so that work can be displayed there, which I think would be really cool for students to have the opportunity for something that they create. So reach out to us about doing that if you want to do this activity in your classroom and are interested in having some students submit their work. And also I do classroom visits, like give presentations about my art and about like getting to go to places in the world and what that can be like for a career. So if you ever want me to visit your classroom and present or kind of guide students through this activity or anything, definitely reach out to me as well. But obviously you have the tools to do that now yourself. And lastly, just thank you all very much for joining. It means a lot to me. When I started this in my career, I was just thinking about making art about climate change. And then I realized that wasn't enough for me. I wanted a way to share that with other people and to give this as a tool for other people to make art about using data. Like, I didn't want to keep that idea as just mine. I wanted to share it and be part of getting people kind of talking and learning about these topics and making beautiful art about it. So I appreciate you guys being interested in joining and bringing this into your classrooms.
Thank you very much.
And I was just double checking when the show, so the show for displaying student artwork in Rockland is going to be April and May of 2023. So you have time to like do this activity like next school year too, and then like submit the student work to the emails. And I can put the emails in the chat, mine and Tori's.
What's the name of the museum again in Rockland? The gallery?
It's the Friends of Maine Coastal Islands Visitor Center.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys very much for joining.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank you. You were queued up to come to my school like before COVID, and then like everything fell through because COVID hit. So I don't know if you remember at Tremont.
Oh, that's right.
I had called and emailed and everything and written a grant, and then it never happened. So it sounds like you're moving now far away.
I am, but I would be totally up for doing virtual visits. I know it's not as nice, but
yeah, I think, you know, at some point that would be great. I'll probably do it next year with collaboration with my science teacher doing life science. She's doing life science next year. So I'd love to be in touch next year, you know, in the fall. Thank you so
that would
much.
be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Jill, Tori, Carney, Michelle, thank you all so much. Appreciate it. And Jill, I will send any feedback your direction.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you,
All
Shari.
right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Carney, Tori.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.